Welcome to the Career Coffee Chat podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Urban, certified career strategist and executive coach, removing career roadblocks so you can achieve more impact, influence, and income. Welcome to Career Coffee Chat, and today we'll be joined with Alana Hill from 2 Hill Consulting to talk about managing your boundaries and managing that work-life blend. Most importantly, we'll talk about how to turn stress into success. And Alana Hill is a queen of resiliency. She is the queen of turning stress into success. And what Alana does is she is an international change and leadership expert. And she is also an international speaker and author. And she has several books out, in fact, and one of those is What's Your Catalyst? The Power of Managed Change, and that's her most recently released book. Alana is also an inspiring speaker and professional and consultant who leads professionals to overcome change challenges in their lives and in their organizations. We'll be talking more about the new normal. And we are in the new normal right now with remote work being more prevalent and having to manage this work-life blend. How does that work? How can we set boundaries? And most importantly, how can we turn a challenge into something that actually fuels and ignites our lives to better experiences and not lose your mind in the process? So if this sounds like something you're interested in, you're in the right place. Because Alana Hill is the queen of resiliency, and I'm thrilled to have her on the show. So we'll discuss how to make the most out of our current challenges. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to Alana Hill.
Hey, Aaron.
How are you?
I'm great. So thank you so much for having me.
I am thrilled to have you on the show. How to turn stress into success and manage those boundaries and overcome those challenges that are thrown at us all the time, and we can make, a better world out of it. So what's interesting is we're always wishing for this time of perfection and ease and joy and peace. And while, trust me, I pray for peace every single day, I also am fully cognizant that our most transformational changes comes out of challenges.
Yes.
And I don't know about you, but we've been through a lot lately. And while some of it is like, oh my gosh, this is so stressful, we also kind of have to admit we've come a long way in a very short period of time. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, I think 2020 really speaks to the innate resilience of people. And people are kind of waking up and going, you know what? I'm stronger than I thought. I'm tougher than I thought. I can adapt better than I thought. And, and some people, may not have given themselves enough credit in the beginning. And, because we were all emotionally hijacked. I mean, and it was so hard to think. And we all had this cognitive fog. And we're like, does my neighbor feel like this? Yeah, your neighbor felt like that too.
Yeah. Our friends felt like that. I mean, we were all, I remember thinking early on, I think it was, when the news first hit and I first decided to move out to the country in our country house for the foreseeable future. I remember thinking, I was like, why am I feeling so much anxiety? Like, that's not my normal state. Like, I'm just like all the time. And I'm like, I'm perfectly fine. Like, remote work is normal for me. I haven't really changed a lot. I have this opportunity to serve people at a higher level. Yet I'm feeling stressed and panic. Why is that? Well, it's because I'm responding empathetically to everything else that's going on. Did you feel the same way when you were coaching and consulting with organizations? What kind of feedback did you get about that?
Oh, I mean, people were literally in a sheer panic because, when you think from the business side, there was this incredible fear of the unknown. I serve a lot of oil and gas clients and, in that industry, I mean, on that day, oil went to negative. I mean, so it was, it was kind of the same day the Houston rodeo was canceled, and it was just kind of the day that Houston stood still. And I just remember it so clearly and vividly. And, and sadly, with it being March, and March is already a really emotionally tender month for me. It's my oldest son's birthday, and I lost my oldest son to cancer 6 years ago. So, of course, I had an intense heart focus on his illness, which, ironically, he died on a ventilator. So when you think about trigger words, they were everywhere: ventilator, lungs, and so I literally just, and like most people, right, I turned the news off because, there's this saturation point that we reach far more quickly than we give ourselves credit for, right? So it's way over budget on the news, and just realize, just needed to walk through, the grief that I was going through, and then how that wave of grief was also affecting my clients because of the loss of business, the loss of certainty. That's frightening for a lot of people. So there were a lot of very justified fear, and I was really, really defensive of, or protective, I guess is the word. I was really protective of people, because as you were talking about being empathic, I was really protective of people whose emotions were being discounted. And that angered me so much. I mean, it was this righteous indignation about, how dare you, make someone feel foolish, or whatever ridicule was happening when people were being cautious, or when people were worried that they could lose a loved one because of this horrible disease that we were faced with. I was really disappointed by a lot of the reactions that I saw, even from people that I knew.
Right. And I think we all agree, everybody tuning in, what are some of the challenges and stressors that you've been dealing with? What are the challenges that you've been dealing with? Whether that's because you're having to deal with this work-life blend, or something else that's happened because of COVID, because of the pandemic, because the socioeconomic disruptions happened as a result of that. And what are some of the things you would like us to discuss and talk about and focus on that'll help you transform out of this, like when you go from like a caterpillar stage, this chrysalis. I feel like we're in the chrysalis now.
Yeah.
I think we are moving. We are moving through this. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's not as soon as we would hope. I remember when we first went into this, I was thinking, oh, June, we should be back to normal. Not even close. Not even close. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is going to be around for a while. I should have woke up when I realized that, when I heard Google had decided not to have people go back to work until next year. And now I think they're pushing that out as well. So, and Google tends to be probably the best search engine, and they probably know a lot more than I do. Maybe.
What were they finding on their searches that they weren't telling?
Like, that's the first thing I thought. I was like, wait a minute, what do they know that I don't know? Amy says, work from home isolation and trying to stay connected is her big stressor right now. So let's talk about it. That's okay with you. How to stay connected in that isolation, because particularly for those folks who enjoy being around people, it's like crazy time right now.
And I mean, as a not just self-proclaimed, but everybody labels me as an extrovert. I'm a fun, outgoing nerd. Let me pause and say, hey, Amy, I'll see you at the PMI conference in a couple of weeks. But yeah, so I remember early on, several extroverts, we would post on Facebook, check on your extroverted friends. We are not okay. And where that is concerned, we haven't been okay. I mean, and it's interesting though, when you think about our unique giftings and our unique passions, because, I love connecting with people. I love talking with people. I just love a good conversation, and then followed by another good conversation, some laughter. It's the best medicine. So I immediately took to Zoom as much as I could. And while I'd been using Zoom before, I was Zooming. I was the Zoom ambassador for every organization I was part of. For my Bible study, we put us on Zoom. For work, I was serving as the programs chair for the National Speakers Association Houston chapter. So I immediately pivoted us to Zoom so that we could continue our meetings as well. So our monthly workshops, but also some intermediary meetings, and just really leveraging that technology so that while we were physically distant, we didn't have to be socially distant, right? And Zooming my family, that was the fun part, was really teaching my dad how to Zoom. That was hilarious. And he was still Zooming from his phone and talking to his phone. And there's like two pictures of my dad on there, right? Because he's connected twice. And so really supporting people through that. And then I even ran out and bought the hashtag Geek with a Purpose, because I was like, I got to do something with this, because I'm a geek. And here we are in this pandemic, and I've got to help people continue to connect, because we were made for community. Mm-hmm. And whether that's in our spiritual walk, whether that's in our workplace, every professional association that I'm a member of, and I'm so grateful for PMI, for ATD, for NSA, for immediately responding and keeping us connected. So there were some days there were almost too many opportunities. I was like, I don't feel like Zooming today. Now, you know, not today. But it was just really being, you know, and kind of really pacing, right? Mm-hmm. Finding that pacing, because while the connection was necessary, knowing that not just in Houston, not just nationally, but globally, we were grieving. And grief takes on so many different forms. So it was a really, really tender time to be around people. And so you just knew that you wanted to be more careful with your words and be careful with people's hearts, because you're being responsible for their hearts. And so I never wanted to say or do anything that would, like I said, insult anyone's grief journey, because I mean, there were people who I knew that were like immediately laid off, you know, that immediately lost work. And there were people that were going to work and they weren't sure if they were going to have a job. So the amount of unease and uncertainty just required an extra dose of compassion.
Exactly. And at all levels too.
I show up. Yeah.
Yeah. At all levels. I mean, from friends to my clients' CEOs. I had one CEO and she was literally in tears. She was like, Erin, she's one of those that's a wonderful leader. She's a heart leader. She's a heart-driven leader. But she knew that she was doing the best she could, but she wanted to do all the things and like be there for everybody. She's kind of absorbing all this psyche and emotional empathic impact from her entire team, her entire organization. And that was a lot to take on. So just being able to be there for her and giving her a safe space to process what she was dealing with, so she could be, you know, come out of that stronger. Right. So, you know, part of it is, if you don't have someone there to help create that safe space for you, creating that safe space so you can just be, and also be okay with whatever emotions you're processing. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You're not bad. You're not underperforming because you're having a bad reaction to something, or you're struggling through some of this. And as we're starting to roll through and starting to roll out of, but we're starting to roll through this experience, just know that you don't have to be everything for everybody.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Alana, but do you remember all the, well, you should be writing a book and learning a new language and all this free time on your hands? I'm like, no.
Yeah, I was laughing this morning that my Spanish proficiency has not changed. That was, it was one of those, I should obviously, brush off, and, now's a great time to really get that Spanish fluency like you promised, and you should bang out 2 more books and have 3 online courses. So it didn't take long before I just accepted that my productivity wasn't where I wanted it to be. And then you add in, in the work from home dynamic, so many people they didn't say, oh, please let me work from home. I really want to work from home because this is something that I just desire and aspire to do. Yeah. People were forced to work from home. So we know what happens in the change curve. When you're forced, you have to get to the point of acceptance. And so many people were even having to accept that was the dynamic that they were forced into. And even myself, as someone who years ago, please let me work from home, took it all the way up to almost to the C-suite of Big Blue when I worked there. Insisting that, this is a great way to work, and being a pioneer in teleworking. So even with that background and that experience of knowing the benefits of virtual workplaces and virtual teams, even I still had to say, okay, it's one thing to want it. It's another thing to have to do it. Mm-hmm. And, so the first thing is a mindset change, which is, shifting your language so you don't really get to sit there and convince yourself, well, I choose to work from home, because no, you don't really choose to work from home. You can't even do that. There was no choice. The choice was taken away. And so there were a lot of emotions to process about the fact that it wasn't a choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is. And then there are some people who prefer to be remote. So Christine mentioned how, let me know how not to be jealous of people who continue from work from home, because not everyone is extroverted. So for those people who prefer being in their nest, I have some clients, in fact, a large part of my client base is, people who are identify with being more reserved. And I taught this one girl, and she's like, we're walking through, okay, what's the best next step for me? What should I do? And she's talking about her nest and her office and her comfortable space she's developed for herself, that, self-care and all of that. And whenever she talked about that, her voice lifted, and she just totally changed. I knew she was really attached to that existence physically for herself. I was like, okay, so whatever you do next, that has to remain. And the good news is that can, in a lot of cases, but in the case of Christine, who just shared, she has to now go back to the work a couple days a week. And my husband will be looking forward to doing the same thing as well. Although for him, he's of the mind that he'll get more done around other people, because as Amy's pointed out, that loss of the water cooler conversation is a big deal. I think we realize how much we actually get done in all those meetings and touch points that we sometimes complain about.
Absolutely. I'll come back to Amy's point in just a second, but I wanted to touch on the being mindful of not being, or how are we careful to not be jealous of that? I mean, in my own household, from the moment, like I said, the day that Houston stood still, my husband wasn't afforded the benefit. I think it's still a benefit, even though for many of us, it was a shocker that, oh my God, we have to work from home. It was a benefit that I think in time, many of us adjusted to, but my husband had to keep going to work. So he's never had that work cessation that many of us had to even kind of collect and process a lot of things that were going on. And then, of course, there's the immediate concern that, wait a minute, especially early on, it was a novel virus. It is still considered a novel virus. There's so much unknown about it. And he had to kind of go out into it every day. So it's this whole, I'm sending him out into it every day. But then on the flip side, he couldn't just sit when he needed to sit. I had the benefit of being able to sit when I knew my body was saying, just sit, just stop today. And so, for those, whether you're back in the office or whether you're at home, I mean, there are pros and cons to both situations, kind of resuming that face-to-face connection, and by face-to-face, mask-to-face, mask-to-mask, I guess. There are, it energizes some people, so they need that. But I don't know. I just always live by the adage of being content in all circumstances, and or certainly trying to be, and being intentional about that. So realize that you've got some great advantages that someone else doesn't have. They've got some great advantages that you don't have, and just try to take that part in stride. I would encourage you that, because the comparison can end up getting you bound up, right? Oh, they get to do this. No, I get to do, so both can certainly work to your advantage. And to Amy's point, I love the water cooler talk, especially going back to the whole, what do extroverts do? And I've done some sessions for like PMI and other organizations about leading virtual teams. And it's really about incorporating that virtual water cooler talk into your team meetings, into those stand-up meetings, doing the how's everybody doing, not just the COVID check-in, but the pulse, they're people, they're breathing, see how they're feeling. And I love to help people have water cooler conversations effectively, having emotionally intelligent water cooler conversations. Especially, I mean, we're less than 30 days away from the election now. And I won't demonstrate my excitedness about that, although I'm very politically active. And I think, we certainly all should exercise our right to vote. I don't tell people who to vote for, although I do have a sign in my front yard. You don't need to know it for. But in a work context, the whole point is that these types of things are going to come up. And we have to be able to have these types of conversations, or these mentions of what matters to us, without shutting people down, because we bring our whole selves to the workplace, whether it's the virtual workplace or the face-to-face or mask-to-mask workplace. So we have to be mindful of how we respectfully have these conversations that allow people to be their authentic self in the workplace.
That's a good point. Bringing your authentic self into any environment is so important. And also allowing other people theirs is also important, even if you don't agree.
Yep.
I know that through these challenging times that some people have been, great friends and have dissolve that friendship because of political differences or differences of other opinions. And I feel like that's a shame, because I will share with you that my own mother does not share my political standpoints. And not that I'm a strong political rah-rah person. I'm not, because I go beyond just the face of it. I go way deep. But, and I know there's a lot of things that can be done, but it's not my purpose to bring all that to the conversation. That's me. And I need to allow her and just offer her the opportunity to, have you considered this or not? And ask people, oh, really? That's fascinating. Please explain more. Why do you feel that way? Instead of, well, that's not right, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, we're in the culture of tell, and we love to tell people what we think. But we struggle to listen sometimes. It is a mindset. It's a narrative you tell yourself a lot of times. I'm not trying to belittle stress, because I know personally that stress is a big impactor on my performance. But the first step is, what's the narrative? So Elena, would you like to share with us a little bit more about how do you turn stress into success? What's that process look like to you?
So being a trained and practicing project manager for years and emphasizing change management, how change impacts people, it's really kind of beginning with the end in mind. That one of my favorite Covey principles, but really giving myself room, especially in this climate and in this space, giving myself room, a lot more grace, a lot more freedom, a lot more flexibility to accomplish what I need to accomplish. And by that, and so when I say beginning with the end in mind, is really being clear on what matters right now. Because what your goals were for 2019, and as you're coming into 2020, we all had a 2020 vision. Well, if you haven't adjusted those for your current set of circumstances, then you're setting yourself up for failure. You're not setting yourself up for success. And so success is really defined as accomplishing goals that you've committed to. So it's really about what that commitment looks to in that season. I'm very big about asking yourself. One of my favorite quotes from Ecclesiastes is this: the season. To everything there is a season. And 2020, from a season standpoint, it's just a very, very different season. So you may have entered in January with this ideal. You may have mapped out your January. I'm that person. And I looked at that map. I didn't throw it away. I didn't crumble it, but I looked and I said, okay, well, let's prioritize. This is still a high priority. This is still a high priority. This is going to get deferred. This is going to get deferred. This I might, I'll hold myself maybe to a 50%, by the end of the year, but you have to be willing to adjust your goals for your circumstances. As you mentioned, I can't be the queen of resilience if I haven't walked through numerous ups and downs and haven't had to reprioritize my work successes and my personal successes constantly, because that's what life is. We're constantly negotiating what those were. When my son was diagnosed with cancer in 2010, it was, so when I say in March, it felt like I even commented that I know this feeling, the heaviness on my chest, almost not quite the palpitations, but it just this almost heaviness of breathing. And it was flat on anxiety. And it was, oh my goodness, what's going to happen now? And I remember finding out, confirming his diagnosis and taking to my computer, emailing my clients, letting them know that I needed to evaluate some things. And then I would find out what my commitments would look like. Because my first priority was naturally my son. And that hasn't changed, right? I'm still a mama bear. And when COVID hit, I was concerned about my kids. Two of them are adults. One of them is on the other side of heaven, but I've got one that was finishing his junior year in high school. So that was my most immediate concern. And then serving my clients and making sure that my clients were okay was certainly a priority, but not my highest priority. And I encourage everybody to make sure that you and your family was your highest priority. We were in a national crisis, are still in a national crisis. And if this hasn't helped reaffirm your need to prioritize your family as first, but it's really a matter of, what professional commitments we can make in our personal season of life. And it's about evaluating that.
Right. You made a very good point. I don't know about you who have tuned in, but if you feel this way, please do let us know, or if you have any questions about it. One of the things that I find with a lot of my clients is if they're currently gainfully employed, they are working ridiculous hours.
Yes.
They're not setting aside time for themselves. We mentioned that boundaries and managing work-life blend, they're not setting those boundaries. And part of it, I don't know how you feel about this, Alana, but do you feel like some of it is guilt?
Mm-hmm.
I have a job, therefore.
Oh, survivor's remorse is a real thing, and something that I even had to kind of talk myself out of, because I know it's not a fallacy, but I know it's not something that I'm going to harbor, right? So many of our emotions, when we go to Plutch's model of our emotions, there's some that, yes, I accept this is the emotion that I'm dealing with this time, and this is an emotion. I'm like, oh, I reject this emotion. I acknowledge that I have it, but I will not let it consume or take space in my heart and in my life. And survivor's remorse is one of those, because it's a type of guilt. And guilt, while we acknowledge it, we don't let it take up residence. And one of the most effective ways to alleviate what could even look like guilt is to serve people, and not to serve out of guilt, but to just live your life other focused. And guilt never has a place in your heart, because you can look at guilt and go, well, it's A, I didn't make them lose their job. And B, I'm doing what I can, no more, no less. I'm not killing myself to prove anything, but I'm being other centered, and I'm committing to helping in whatever capacity that I can. And again, not overwhelming yourself in service. When COVID first hit, I committed to once a week driving to drop off food to people who were, because food insecurity was then and still continues to be a huge problem. It was a safe, socially distant way that I could contribute to that situation, and that has not gone away. And I actually need to re-engage with the charity that I was serving. But that is one of the best ways to be able to look a negative emotion in the face and say, "You don't belong here."
Amen. I love that. Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. So Michael mentioned, let's see here, I'll show this. I won't put it up because it does block the screen a little bit, but too long. So he mentioned he was rift and networking when the entire industry was being impacted, thousands in a few weeks, as October quarterly reports are due, industrial survival mode. And I've mentioned a few other times in some of the talks I've done where we either have a survive or a thrive cycle. Mm-hmm. And right now we're in a survive cycle. So thank you for reminding me of that, Michael. We are definitely in a survive cycle right now. So you're talking about that season. So he said, so the next steps for my age as my lifelong industry is trying to survive. Again, that survive cycle. I'm sure other industries are in the same environment. So Michael is just very much in a survive. And Michael, we would love to help you through this. So let's talk about the narrative you have for yourself right now. What might that narrative, and how I would offer you an opportunity to consider that narrative and ask if that narrative is serving your goals. Alana, do you have any suggestions for Michael?
Yeah, no, actually. And I mean, I don't reject the survive and thrive cycle, because we certainly have times when we feel that we can give less output. But the reality is, if we look at life like a grading scale for kids, for example, and 100 is typically, that's your A plus, and that's your output that defines excelling. Well, in these type of seasons, whether it's an extreme downturn or an economic collapse or a pandemic, right? You guys with me? Or Hurricane Harvey, you with me? Then your grading scale isn't on 100 scale. You drop that grading scale, and then you commit to still hitting that, because what that does for your mindset is that you realize that you're still accomplishing what you set out to accomplish, but you essentially give yourself a bell curve. You guys remember those curve busters in class? You were that curve buster, weren't you, Aaron?
No.
Yeah, they would throw the curve. We adjust those expectations, and because what this does for our, not just our self-esteem, for rah-rah-rahing us, but our emotional well-being, is that it minimizes feelings of failure. Because feelings of failure is if you maintain a 100 level of expectation in a season where at best you can give 40, 50. Again, losing a child, or even the potential of losing a child. So this has been a 10-year journey from the potential of losing to losing, all in the same time. As I mentioned, 2020 was very similar to 2014. That was the year when I lost my son, but that was also the year that oil and gas tanked. If Houston recalls that. Sounding familiar to 2020, the only thing we didn't have was a pandemic that was affecting every other house. So being able to redefine what thriving looks like in a season is so powerful. And that is one of the keys to our resilience, is knowing that, you know what, this is a really rough year, but I've level set my expectations, and I'm still meeting those expectations. I'm not meeting 2019's expectations. I'm meeting my adjusted expectations. And as a result, I feel good about what I'm putting out into the world. I feel good about what I'm contributing to my household, to my extended family. And it becomes really, really important. We say mindset shift, self-talk, whichever number you want to use for that. It's really about taking captive those thoughts and holding yourself accountable to what you can hold yourself accountable to. And that's important.
And letting go of the things you cannot control.
Absolutely.
I mean, we cannot personally control the oil and gas industry, whether it's goes up or down. We cannot personally control the virus. Can't personally, make magic wand and make that go away. Mm-hmm. I'd like to personally get rid of all mosquitoes. That's just my personal statement.
Yeah. I mean, so we're like on the 13th plague for 2020. I mean,
what is this mosquito thing? Anyway, so other than that, let's see, really understanding when you're shifting stress to success and shifting out of a survive mental cycle into something that you would consider, okay, I'm thriving, I'm okay. Mm-hmm. I'm letting go of that which I cannot control. I am focusing on what I can do, what I can control. And most importantly, I'm giving myself space and grace. Right? I'm readjusting my priorities. I'm readjusting my goals to be reasonable. I'm also not aligning my own sense of self-worth to things that I cannot affect control on. Right. That's a big deal because so many people are in transition. Number one thing that happens is our self-worth takes a hit because we as Americans tend to associate our self-worth with our having a job, which the two are totally not related at all whatsoever. So I'd encourage, if that's you at all, think about the impacts of what you have done in your career, what you can add value to, what you look to add value to, what your goals are. Paula here, let's see. Jesse says ditto on Texas mosquitoes. Right. Paula said contentment is important. Some of us are extroverts, but contentment in working from home is because we find other ways to connect with others. And she mentioned also a socially distant ice cream has become a great staple with her and her friends. So yes, making that time. What's interesting? Any of you who maybe have let your network grow a little bit stale over the past couple of years, now is a great time to reach out to people. Wouldn't you agree, Elena?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I've when we look at the trials that we're dealing with, and they're absolutely trials, and you guys have already heard me, I will not in any way diminish or downplay what's going on. But it's also afforded us some opportunities. For example, I've connected with more people on LinkedIn, and we say, oh, well, but that's virtual. No, I mean, I'm talking, real not face to face, but real full on conversations, in the inbox, and really getting to know people, and then even jumping on a Zoom so that we can Zoom connect and still have a coffee, right? So, and I've always been a proponent of that, just because of even in 2019, when I was traveling, when I was training and speaking in a lot of places, it was still valuable for me in between those to stop and connect with people. Relationships matter, and continuing those relationships are really important to our well-being, to our business success, to our overall success. I mean, for example, I've got a senior going into high school, and I love the fact that I've got a great network of people that I'm like, you know what? I think I want my son to talk to this person about, this career choice. I mean, so there's so many benefits that we mutually gain from that. But so many people were kind of like, oh, but it's through technology, and that's a problem. It's not, it's personal. If I can see you and I can see you doing this or doing this, it creates this personal connection that our bodies are so wired to have. I also found that if physical touch is your love language, like it is mine, that the next time you have a coffee or a happy hour with a friend of yours, everybody do this at the end. It really releases the hormones in your body as if you were being hugged by the person you're looking at.
That's a great idea. That's a great tip. Thank you.
I needed that because my poor husband, he couldn't hug me. No, he couldn't keep up. He could not keep up with the deficit of hugs, and I needed somebody where that's my love language.
Oh, I'm a hugger.
Yeah. I was like, oh my God, I need that. My son would see me coming. Oh my gosh, she wants to hug me again. And I'm like, okay, he doesn't want to hug me anymore. So I was so thankful when I found this out. And I was like, oh, it's true. Your body, our physiology, our designer, he knew what he was doing. So, and this pandemic didn't catch him by surprise.
Well, if those of you tuned in, please let me know if you have any other questions or comments or anything else you'd like to know about how to turn stress into success, setting work-life boundaries, turning challenges into something that's not so detrimental, and we have a conversation around that. Let us know what your thoughts, questions, comments are. And if you love the show, please do feel free to share this with your network. And share this with other people who can leverage and use this information, because after all, we are all in this together. And Michael says it's a good idea, hugging yourself. I love that. And Paula wants to share a favorite quote. She says, faith has not been tested. Faith that has
been tested cannot be trusted.
Sorry, I can't.
Yes.
Thank you.
So true, Paula. So true. So true. And that's how we build it. And so many of us, my prayer certainly is that people come out with an even more fortified faith. But even in that, one thing that I certainly want to touch on when we talk about boundaries, self-care. Self-care is not selfish. That's one of my favorite quotes to tell people, because you'd be amazed at how many mothers I interact with, first of all, having kids and being in kind of that mommy world sometimes, and really looking a woman in the face or a man in the face, because men suffer from it even worse than we do because of the provider protector. They're constantly boxing at anything that harms us. So men right now, you guys are on emotional overload, and my heart goes out to you, because you're wired to be a protector. You want to protect your family from COVID, and the best way you can is to help them follow sound science. But the main thing when we talk about our boundaries and our self-care, have a morning routine that feeds your body and feeds your soul. You will be so much more effective when you do that. In Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he makes it clear that habit 7 of that daily sharpening the saw, the habit of daily self-renewal, is the habit that enables you to do all the other habits. So you can't skip that. And especially because we know too the science of needing vitamin D and needing to be outside, even if it's walking around your block 2 times. Because I'm not going to say 1. I'm not going to get you off the 1. Walk around the block 2 times. It'll take you at most 15 minutes. Come in, take a shower, get dressed, go to work. It's a game changer. And if you're like, I don't know, Erin rides her bike like from here to Texas or to Tennessee. We're in Texas. Okay. I run, but finding some physical outlet, because I say all the time, my day starts with Jesus and endorphins. And so you need to find something that helps you start your day in such a way that you, especially if you're leading a team, because you're responsible for helping set some of the tone and some of the energy. And so you want to show up as your best self, and you're your best self when you've taken care of your body, take your vitamins, your nutrients, all these other things that you need. But neglecting our daily routines has been what is when I talk to people, has been one of the biggest hindrances to their ability to perform. Kind of, you can't roll out of bed and roll to the laptop, right? You need to ground, and that exercise, some days that's me sitting on the floor stretching, because that's still an exercise. So adjusting that up and getting away from Groundhog Day are definitely ways to kind of keep your head above water.
Yeah, you made a very good point with Groundhog Day. And for those of you who've never seen the movie, you just get up every day and do the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again. And you just, I'm sure that some of us feel like that. Like every day is the same day and it's never ending. But when you make it different, then it doesn't have to be that way. And I will second the motion to just do some exercise. When I'm coaching people into leadership and how to evolve into leadership or how to be better leaders, it's one of those foundational pillars is devoting time for yourself and exercise. Because if you don't take care of you, you're much less likely to take good care of your teams.
Mm-hmm.
That's very true. The hardest person to lead is yourself. So, Alana, do you have any parting thoughts for folks that are tuning in before we wrap up?
Just really as much as working from home is something that you're forced to do technically, you still don't have to treat it as something that you're forced to do. Look for the benefits and the blessings that come from it, the additional time that you've gotten back, and leverage that time for you. Don't just give any extra time that you have. Don't just give that to work. Give that to you. Give that to your family. Give it to what builds you up. And then that again it's going to pay dividends. So make those investments in yourself and reap those the rewards of that throughout your day and throughout your week, and just be intentional about it.
Thank you so much, Alana. Alana, it is a deep pleasure. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do check out her book. Check out her website. She has a book called, most recently, What's Your Catalyst? The Power of Managed Change. Fantastic book.
Thank you for tuning in on the Career Coffee Chat podcast. It's been a pleasure. Feel free to reach out to me. My email is coacheurban@gmail.com or tweet at coacheurban, Instagram coach.eurban, or reach out to my Facebook group, Elevate Your Career. So I'd love to learn more about you, hear your insights, and what questions you have. You can find out more about me at coacheurban.com. And don't forget, please do reach out on LinkedIn. You can find me at Erin Urban. Until next time, cheers. Here's to caffeinating your career.